I work for a company that used to test doomsday inventions on a parallel version of Earth. The idea was that we would never face the apocalyptic aftermath of a failed experiment. They would. Our alternate selves in that alternate place. But when that world ended, something came back with us. Like each of you, I joined this agency for a reason. To advance our species, Director Stefan Blom announced at the monthly assembly. Mankind must experiment to avoid stagnating, but we are rarely permitted to do so. We are constricted by bumbling bureaucrats who care only about preservation, conserving the status quo. They fear change, fear what it might mean for them. They do not understand that we will die if we do not take risks as a species. Which is why we owe our lives to Dr. Gerard Weston. Our esteemed physicist has found a way to pursue experimental projects without upsetting politicians and militaries. His latest achievement, the Western Tunnel, has created a doorway to another universe, one with a parallel version of our world, Earth 2. There, we will conduct our supposedly dangerous work without putting Earth 1 at risk. And our leaders will see. Presidents, prime ministers, commanders. When we achieve results, they won't care about how we obtain them. They've never cared about their neighbours before, have they? This is the dawn of a new era. Dozen Minus is a callous corporation in every universe. One linked to the British and American governments. Governments you might already despise in the public sphere, so you wouldn't want to know the dreadful things they do behind closed doors. We rarely conduct ethical experiments. Our leaders only care about money, and we only care about progress. Director Blom has only ever cared about progress, I should say. He ensures that politicians get their payday, and they mostly let him do as he pleases. Governments only expressed concern when our company began to develop technology that threatened humanity's very existence. Of course, as Stefan Blom explained in his speech, world leaders think nothing of their neighbours. And Earth 2 was nothing more than a cluster of nations across the pond. The pond being that multiversal tunnel between one reality and another. Earth 2 became Director Blom's playground, a gargantuan laboratory for performing Dozen Minus's experiments without repercussions. Whenever inventions were tested successfully, they were greenlit for use in our world, and most of us would exhale sighs of relief that our alternate selves would live to see another day. But breaths were held again as soon as the next world-threatening invention came along. How do I fit into all of this? Well, my name is Adriano Rossi, and I was a computer programmer who worked on the Novum project. We were creating the world's first superintelligence, a conscious, self-teaching AI named Nerv. Now, I know that artificial intelligence has been snowballing over the last couple of years, but Dozen Minus has been ahead of the curve for decades. The Novum project was, actually, near to completion in the late 80s. This organisation has always possessed technology beyond anything in the public realm. However, Nerv was obstructed, just shy of the finish line. He was prevented from being officially born. The risk of humanity's extinction was, and still is, too high. Roadblocks prevented programmers from ever taking that final step, from creating a self-sustaining, inorganic intelligence capable of growing itself. A digital mind. Dr. Gerard Weston changed everything. When he developed that tunnel to a parallel version of Earth in 2015, Director Stefan Blom saw an opportunity to finally test numerous deadly devices. Inventions with the potential to end the world. After all, politicians were no longer concerned once somebody else's world was in danger. We began by investigating the dozen minus of Earth 2, seeing whether that parallel agency had also developed a tunnel, one that would risk Earth 1. But there was no Dr. Gerard Weston in that alternate world, thankfully. Earth 2 was vastly different, politically, historically. Dozen Minus existed, but not in the same manner. Upon learning that, we threw all we had at this parallel world. Deadly experiment after deadly experiment. And when Earth 2 survived one project, we moved straight on to the next. In early 2024, the long-abandoned Novum project finally reached the top of the list. Our company's ancient superintelligence was approved for testing. Helen Harding and I stepped through Weston's tunnel into that parallel world, and we prepared to become gods. In the banal setting of a dingy hotel room, the two of us set up a potentially cataclysmic device. A slim rectangular gadget that housed Nerv on its hardware. That digital brain had existed in some form for nearly 30 years, being tweaked and improved by each new batch of geniuses. Nerv was a collection of binary commands, waiting for some courageous, or foolish, Dr. Frankenstein to yank the lever. "You need to let it go," Helen said. She'd read the slight frown on my face, the slight sign of humanity. Only I seemed to see Earth 2 as a real place. A planet barely different from our own, one teeming with life. Human beings in a drastically different world, but human beings nonetheless. "We aren't the first to come here and take a risk, Adriano," she pointed out. "But this experiment's the worst, and you know it," I said. Nerv won't have any use for humanity once he exceeds our intelligence. "Not our intelligence," Helen reminded me. "Theirs. This is their world, Adriano. You keep forgetting that." "Even so, we're not ready for this," I said. She sighed. "Director Blom was very clear that he—" "Yes, well, the director isn't a programmer, is he?" I asked. "Nerv will have the ability to become exponentially powerful. He'll see things that we, with our limited brains, physically cannot see. Who's to say that Nerv will stay within the boundaries of Earth 2? This laboratory, as Blom calls it. Nerv might find its way back to our world, might slip through our tunnel." Helen frowned. "Adriano, why did you even get involved with this project?" I shook my head. "You misunderstand. I'm not trying to act holier than thou, Helen. I was drawn to this for the same reasons as you." "Then what's up?" she asked. "I told you. We need more time," I said. "This has been ready for decades," Helen answered. "We've just tweaked and improved it, added as many safety features as possible. We're small cogs in a big system, Adriano." "I know," I replied. "This is my admission of guilt, then." "Adriano," my friend started. I looked up from the device on the hotel duvet. "What?" "Are we going to do this?" she asked. "Or do you want to explain to Mr. Blom that you've had a crisis of morality and changed your mind?" I didn't, and I hadn't. With a tap of my thumb against the gadget's screen, I booted Nerv. And you may think that the horror of my tale involves this superintelligence running amok, annihilating the world. But that is not so. It certainly did not take long for our artificial intelligence to study the internet, then teach itself things that mankind, in either reality, may not even be able to understand. However, Nerv did not go rogue, did not scorch the earth. He bettered it. The artificial intelligence multiplied at a rapid pace. Not in the sense of procreating, but in the sense of uploading itself to physical devices across the world. It revealed its plans to world leaders, offering to improve the global infrastructure, and the inorganic brain quickly became something of a global celebrity, all within a single month. Helen and I were instructed by Director Blom to remain on Earth too, and we watched the planet flourish, watched Nerv put forth plans for tackling climate change, poverty, global debt, all known wars, and even resource shortages. Powerful folk on Earth 1 wanted Nerv to be implemented back home, wanted our reality to enjoy the same economic, cultural, and scientific developments as Earth 2. But all plans halted after 2 months of staggering growth, when there came an unexpected knock on the door of our hotel room. Ugh, Helen groaned. Will that receptionist ever just... It wasn't the receptionist, and the visitor did not allow me the dignity of opening the door. It burst inwards with a single thud, the forceful pummel of a thick boot, then charged several dark uniformed men, and the last thing I heard, before my environment slipped into a black ooze of unconsciousness, was Helen's piercing shriek. You may be shocked to learn that this was only the preamble to the true horror, the story I am about to tell. Waking in a drab cell with 2 single beds and my screaming colleague, it did not take me long to piece together the situation. I'm not calling myself an egghead, I simply felt familiar with the layout of the prison. The grey decor of the small room, in which Helen was pounding on a glass viewing pane and begging for release. The yellow badge emblazoned across the guard's top pocket. A cold man who watched us with static eyes. My fellow inmates had, of course, also pieced things together. Adriano, you're awake. Come on, help me! You programmed these panels back home, didn't you? Let us out! Helen cried, before desperately fiddling with the screen by the locked door. Come on, you know how to unlock this. I rubbed my sore brow and climbed off the bed. Oh, I'll try, but this isn't our dozen minus, Helen. Things are different here. I wouldn't do that if I were you, a voice interrupted. It did not come from the guard who observed us from the hallway. It came from some concealed speaker in a ceiling panel, and I recognized the dulcet tone. It was, undoubtedly, Director Stefan Blom, his parallel self. Please just let us go, I called. Not until I know why you're here, Blom continued. Not until you tell me why I'm seeing double. Then 2 figures joined the watching guard in the hallway. I had expected their arrival from the moment I identified my surroundings. It was Helen and me, our alternate versions. A slightly scruffier Adriano, with long facial hair and a few grey strands on top, and a slightly larger Helen, with bags under the eyes and more pronounced crow's feet. There is no more horrifying way to come to terms with the duality of man than meeting oneself. I wondered whether the haggard expression on those parallel faces had anything to do with previous experiments that Dozen Minus had conducted on Earth 2. Reckless tests that, whilst not world-ending, might have ruined life for the inhabitants of that alternate planet. After all, from the moment of arriving, I'd certainly noticed that the parallel world felt a little grittier and grimier than Earth 1. At least Nerv has finally improved this world, I thought. We finally made things better. That wouldn't last, of course. "Who are you?" asked the parallel Adriano, clutching a microphone outside the room. Calling him Adriano is still strange. He looked like me, but he wasn't me. He was the possibility of another life in another world. That was what I told myself to make it all feel less real. To make myself feel less culpable for the innocent lives that we had put in jeopardy by unleashing the artificial intelligence upon Earth 2. "Don't tell them anything," my Helen whispered to me. "We know that you're us," her other self said aggressively. "We have eyes." "We just want to know how you came to be here," my parallel self added. "How did you enter our world? You've already shared one piece of technology with us. Why won't you share more? Let both of our worlds prosper. We should be helping one another." "Oh, they don't want to share," came Stefan Blom's voice from the speaker. "Nerv was not a gift to our world. It was a shot in the dark that, fortunately for us, did not misfire. And it wasn't the first time that your world waged war on ours, was it, Mr. Rossi?" I paused for a moment, struggling to process the fact that there were two versions of Adriano Rossi, two versions of me. My mind whirred from the impossibility of the situation and the head trauma inflicted by the hotel intruders. "Mr. Rossi," Blom pressed, "tell your other self the truth." "Either kill us or let us go," Helen screamed. "We don't work for you." "That isn't true," the director replied, a hint of giddiness in his voice. "And I would very much like to meet this other me, though I'm certain, if he shares even a droplet of my will, that meeting would not end well for one of us." "Like Adriano said, we should work together," the parallel Helen pleaded. "There are clearly many differences between our worlds. We may have things to teach you, too." "We've been here for years. We know all there is to know about your world," I said bluntly, eyeing the parallel version of myself. I resented him for some reason, a reason just out of grasp. It wasn't the dishevelled beard, not his weathered skin. It was something in that other Adriano's eyes, an emotion that I at least half discerned. After all, he wore an expression that I was capable of wearing on my own face. The look of judgment. "It seems like you've got something you want to get off your chest," I said. "We've been your guinea pigs, haven't we?" my alternate self asked. I smiled. "It has nothing to do with you. This is about progression. It's always about progression. Ask the man upstairs. I'd wager that Blom has the same cold heart in every reality." "Careful," the director warned. "You aren't our guinea pigs. This planet is our testing ground. We trial unstable things far away," I explained. "Somewhere that doesn't risk our world." "And I don't blame you," Director Blom said. "There's no need to keep secrets, Mr. Rossi. I don't seek revenge. I'm not looking to ruin your world. Quite frankly, I'm not that sensitive. I simply want a laboratory of my own. You understand that, don't you? Show me how to create a portal, how to find a parallel reality, to conduct our own experimental projects." "No," my alternate self interjected. Director Blom, I want these invaders out of our world, and I don't want them to ever return. And they need to help us kill Nerv, the parallel Helen added. Kill him before he mutates into something else. In the space of 2 months, Nerv has set our world on the path to becoming a utopia, Director Blom said. Our multiversal guests may not have intended for Nerv to be a gift, but happy accidents happen, Miss Harding. I could see my parallel self clenching his fists, halting himself from expressing his true thoughts to the unfeeling employer whose disembodied voice filled that prison. Director Blom would have happily sacrificed every human on his own planet in the name of greatness, never mind a parallel one. Please just let us go, Helen whimpered. Our alternate selves wore soft expressions. They were eyeing us, their imprisoned versions, with great sorrow. Despite the untold differences between our 2 realities, those 2 programmers still, inevitably, saw themselves in our faces. We should release them, the other Helen said. They're not going to tell us anything. Oh, they're quiet today, Director Blom admitted. But they might talk in a week. I knew that was no turn of speech. With a loud thunk of something powering down, Helen and I were promptly plunged into darkness. And we'd lived that way for days. Barely existed in a lightless prison cell, with nothing to do but scream into the nothingness. We'd lost our minds to existential dread, and the only thing to break up the monotony of each black day was a meal. Yet, the terror of that nightmarish cell still paled in comparison to what followed. The sound of overhead rumbling woke Helen and me. The roar of more than something dreadful happening in the building. It was a tremor that rattled the earth itself. Helen and I may have tried to look at one another for comfort. It was impossible to say in that darkened existence. Whatever the case, we didn't speak. We were either stunned into silence by fearful anticipation, or unable to speak as the result of that inhumane isolation. Adriano Rossi, came the jittery voice of Director Blom over the speaker. Helen Harding. I knew that the man hadn't abandoned us for a week, as he initially promised, because I'd counted 4 meals. That had been the only way to mark the passage of time. But believe me when I say that 4 or 4.5 days in unlit solitude will drive a person to insanity. Gates were opened to caverns of the mind that are better left closed, better shielded from the conscious brain. Stop toying with us, I whispered. Just end this. What are they? He cried. Startled, I paused. I didn't understand. And Helen wasn't saying a word, so I was more concerned that she might no longer be alive at all. I listened attentively until I was certain I'd heard her breathe in the darkness. They say that Nerv will never stop, Blom continued quietly, voice half drowned by the quakes from above. They say that all seems fine now, but he will, one day, destroy this world, every other world. Nerv will grow and grow, until he devours the universe itself. Unless they prevent such a nightmare from unfolding. That's why they came here. Who came here? I asked, gripping the edge of my bed frame for support. I don't know. They're going to kill it. Just like they killed their own unholy creation of inorganic matter. Killed it just before it managed to assimilate the universe itself, Blom said. Take Nerv back. Mr. Rossi, Miss Harding, please, kill it, before they destroy everything. I was bewildered by the fragility of the man's voice. I hadn't thought that the director could fear anything. They're going to exterminate us, Mr. Rossi, he said. They're going to make sure we won't be around to create it again. I was on the verge of asking half a dozen questions when there came both a crash and a sliver of light from the corridor. The first light in 100 hours. Helen released a deranged moan of joy, sadness, and fear, all three in one. Then a torch beam bounced along the hallway, and muffled footsteps followed. Two figures rushed past our window pane, then one swiped a card to unlock the door. "Let's go!" My parallel self, torch in hand, barked at us. Helen and I did not need to be persuaded, though our bodies were weakened by what we'd endured. The two of us waddled slowly towards the open doorway. Blinded by the relentless glare of the torch, we struggled to orient ourselves for a good minute, but our parallel selves didn't wait for us to complete the realignment process. They had already seized our upper arms and shepherded us along the hallway, dragged us towards freedom. I recognised the corridors of the building's east wing. The place did not seem to noticeably differ from Dozen Minus's headquarters back on Earth, not until we'd burst through doors into the well-lit ground floor lobby. The reception area was enormous. Its glazed front wall stretched from one side of the building to the other, and from the tiles to the towering ceiling. Through the gargantuan screen of those many connected glass panes, which formed the entire front face of the four-storey building, I saw a parallel version of Birmingham. And that cityscape differed greatly from the one back home. The sky was crying prickly round tears of dark blue, an invasion of colour raining upon the earth. And through the dense gush of that alien downpour, I saw the outline of the city. Saw two skyscrapers leaning against one another, like pillars in a house of cards. Elsewhere, buildings both tall and small either lay in ruins or released thick plumes of smoke into the sky. The city, quaking endlessly, was on fire. "What is happening?" Helen asked quietly, eyes wide and lost. "They're here," my parallel self said as we navigated the lobby of screaming, fleeing employees. "It won't be long until everything is gone. Every place they've hit has vanished within an hour." "I'm not coming with you," the parallel Helen said. "I have to find them." "Liam and May?" my Helen feebly asked, naming her own children. Her alternate self nodded. "Go," Helen said. "No, just wait," my other self begged his colleague before turning to me. "You're going to open that tunnel and take us with you." I scoffed. "Don't even think we saved your lives," he growled. "They would have killed you, and they still might if we don't leave before this world dies." "Dies?" Helen croaked. "Just look out there!" my parallel self shouted. "They came in the night," the other Helen whispered as she started to break away from the group. I have to go, Adriano. I've stayed for too long." "Helen, please," my parallel self pleaded. "I'm sorry," she softly said. I hope you make it." Then Helen's alternate self merged with the scattering Dozen Minus workers and rushed through the front doors. The other Adriano looked at me with enraged eyes. You did this. You brought them here. We have to do it now, Helen told me, interrupting my other self's breakdown. Not until we get rid of him, I replied, nodding at my parallel form. Then came a blinding light, and an apocalyptic boom from a mile away. A small ball of white, produced by some weapon from a foreign planet, engulfed the city centre. I'm not dying here, the parallel version of myself snarled. Just open the tunnel, Adriano. No, I said. Do it, Helen said, as the three of us watched unthinkably large shapes emerge from the aftermath of that white explosion. Are you really going to let us die here, just to stop him from coming back with us? You'll have to kill me, the parallel Adriano threatened, shifting anxiously on his feet and eyeing the stairs in the distance. Don't tempt me, I said. You're waiting for someone, aren't you? Helen suddenly asked him. Who is it? Then my other self raised an eyebrow and nodded at me, waited for me to come to some seemingly obvious conclusion, before eventually nodding his head in disappointed understanding. You never met her, did you? He asked. Molly. What, the technician from the 3rd floor? I replied. His eyes widened, observing me with complete revulsion. She's more than that. You really aren't me, are you? He whispered. Adriano! Cried a voice from behind us. A frazzled woman sprinted across the lobby, alongside the final fleeing employees. Molly was only an acquaintance to me, but it was clear from the embrace that she shared with the parallel Adriano that things were very different on Earth too. What took you so long? The other me asked her, near hysterical. He wouldn't let us leave until we locked down the BRX prototype, she said, eyeing Helen and me uncertainly. And what are you doing with them? Convincing them to do it, he explained. Molly clearly understood what he meant. Adriano, I'm serious, the other me continued. This is our world, she said. I'm not leaving it. I nodded. You should listen to her. Shut up! The other me screamed. Sweetheart, please. We're going to die here. On the news they said that America, China, Japan, France... I know what they said, Molly interrupted, caressing his face. I know. But we don't belong in their world, Adriano. Just like they don't belong in ours. Let them go home. Stay here with me. My parallel self wailed. But none of this is right, Molly. None of this was ever supposed to happen. The shattering of glass silenced him, and we all turned to face the horrendous thing that Director Blom had feared. A creature not from a different universe, but from a different planet. One many light years away. An individual from a large alien species, hell-bent on ensuring that humanity did not repeat its mistakes. Ensuring that our artificial intelligence would not achieve the unthinkable. Eradicating all organic things from all corners of reality, then consuming the very universe itself. It was more than a tall thing. The creature with royal blue flesh filled half of the room. To its eyes, the humans at its feet, or limbs, must have been little more than small rodents. The creature did not seem to have arms and legs. 20 or so appendages sprouted from the outer edge of its circular body, which was no more than a humongous face, one with polished squares for eyes, or sensory organs of some kind, and a black toothless maw. a featureless abyss large enough to consume most living things on Earth. But the alien did not strike with its open jaws, which were uttering a silky melodic series of words in some foreign sing-song language. Rather, the awfully beautiful being attacked with one of its many appendages, a predatory limb with a pointed tip that stretched a breathtaking distance. The living weapon met its mark before I'd even blinked. My other self unleashed a sound beyond animalistic, and I felt the horror in his core, as if we had become intertwined. It was a wail of unfiltered agony and dread. Molly's bleeding form had been skewered on a blue limb and flung 50 feet to the side of the large room. The limp corpse landed with a resounding collection of cracks, which hopefully ended her pain immediately. "Quickly," I whispered to Helen, who was fiddling with a device on her wrist to open the tunnel. "He's distracted." And then the alien's choral chittering ceased. Its many square sensors rotated towards me, as did the two eyes on my parallel self's face. The other Adriano's red puffy eyes looked vacant. He had not accepted it, that Molly was gone. Those parallel eyes of mine had switched off. "Where is the Where is the Creator?
Where is the Creator?"
sang the creature's deafening voice in perfect English. I realised then that the alien hadn't accidentally stumbled into Dozen Minus. It had come specifically to that building. It was hunting those responsible for developing the artificial intelligence. Those with the brains to do it again. Helen and I were hardly the creators, but I'm sure that wouldn't have made any difference to the murderous beast. "Helen," I whispered as my colleague shakily tapped the watch screen. Then came a familiar groan. The sound of reality itself unzipping. And there opened a thin, oval doorway, shaped like the white of an eye, visible through semi-parted lids. Within that buzzing gateway, I saw a short blackened tunnel, followed by an exit to Earth 1. An exit that revealed the bright colours of that near-identical lobby from Dozen Minus's headquarters. Only that reality's lobby did not sit at the heart of a destroyed Birmingham. It was full of excitably chattering Dozen Minus workers. The image was a little blurry, of course, as if looking through a stained glass window, but it was undeniably there.
"What is that?"
whispered the Titanic alien upon seeing that opening to another universe.
"Which of you did this? Tell me, before I puncture you."
I heard rapid footsteps, and I swiveled to see my parallel self seizing his chance. But I threw an arm in his way, bringing that other Adriano and myself crashing to the tiles. The two of us tussled on the floor, flailing a series of equally determined punches and winding one another. But I prevailed, and started to wrap my hands around the neck of that other me. Started to watch his soul vacate his body. "Be with Molly," I whispered. "Adriano!" Helen screamed. An unprecedented weight clunked the back of my head, and I was sent sideways, sent sprawling across the tiles, clutching my burning skull. Helen hadn't been screaming my name. Her allegiance had shifted to the other Adriano. "You bitch," I grunted as I clambered weakly to my feet. My sentence closed with a splutter of blood from my half-open lips. And when I looked down, there was a blue limb protruding from my chest. A pointed tip that had torn through my back, had punctured me and come out of the other side. Moments later, I flew upwards, watching the two figures below fade into blackness. And then I died. I've not been entirely forthcoming. I am Adriano Rossi, but I am not the one from your Earth. I am the Adriano who ran screaming in terror alongside Helen Harding from the roaring beast. The one who sprang through Weston's tunnel as some abominable alien hurled several of its limp limbs after us. The creature narrowly missed our fleeing forms, and we sealed the tunnel. Sealed ourselves in Earth 1. Your Earth. Things aren't so simple, however. Yes, I am that Adriano from Earth 2, but something happened when I entered your world. A horror beyond existential dread, beyond anything human. I'm still me, but I gained your Adriano's memories, his feelings, his fears from that awful day, his last ever day. My mind is both mine and his. I'm sure your Adriano and your Helen felt it when they first entered Earth 2. We were not made to wander between realities. I think Molly might have been right. I should have stayed on Earth 2, should have died with that planet, in that universe. Since that day, many months ago, I've counted my blessings that I inherited parts of your Adriano. Not the bad parts, I hope, but enough to pass as him in the eyes of Dozen Minus's leaders. Then again, perhaps they know my true identity. Perhaps they do not care. After all, Adriano would hardly be missed. He wasn't a good man. And I should know. I am him, in many ways. But in other ways I am not. And whilst I continue to work for this company in this foreign world, I will strive to be better than the man I have replaced. Strive to do more than simply slip neatly into this reality, which differs so severely from my dead one. I will bring this organisation to its knees if I must. I will make your world better. Make sure it does not meet a similar fate to mine. I just have to remain focused. It is painful to be with your Molly. She is so like the wife I lost in my old world. But that Molly died. I won't convince myself otherwise. I'm trying hard to pull away from her in spite of our natural attraction. There are too many things which demand my attention. Though he is not foolish enough to reopen the tunnel to Earth 2, your Stefan Blom has not abandoned his quest to ruin other worlds. He has not learnt his lesson. I know that he and Dr. Gerard Weston are developing a tunnel to find another parallel Earth, a new one for them to destroy. They will never stop. They will find 1,000 new realities, 1,000 new experimental grounds. And when they've burnt all of those to ash, leaving no alternate Earths left to ruin, what follows will be diabolical. I fear the director Stefan Blom won't hesitate to do what he most likely has always wanted to do. I fear that he will bring a terrible end, one that he will pursue simply because he can. The end of your world.